All right, Rand, number two on our consensus with the first pick, DB big board, Jermod McCoy. He'll be 20 years old in a few weeks. So he is young, 6 feet, 193 unofficially. He looks bigger than that to me on tape. Started out at Oregon State in 23, Tennessee last season. He'll be there this season as well. Also played wide receiver in high school. My first note, I want to see how fast he is. Physical cornerback who can play man press. He can play on an island. He can play cover two. He did a lot of things really well, but the speed was my number one question, and I want to hear what you say about that. And that led to my comp, a guy who I loved, but the speed kept being a recurring theme last fall, and that's Will Johnson, second round pick, who ended up being, who, like as I mentioned earlier, is having a great camp for the Cardinals, is probably going to start there. So you like Jermod a little bit more than I do, maybe a lot more. So are you at all concerned about the speed? And then talk to me a little bit about what you're looking for as a team evaluator of a player coming off an ACL that's going to be last January. Is he going to play? What's that going to look like? How does that affect your evaluation?
I mean, honestly, it depends on the news that we get when you go into the school to find out, where he is in his recovery and his rehab. And being that it happened in January, depending on how the season goes, there's a chance that he could be back, let's just say late October, November-ish, and see how he does then. So I think that it remains to be seen. I didn't necessarily have a problem with the speed. I thought his speed was fine. I thought his speed was good. Now, in today's game, a guy that runs, 4.46 is considered to be just okay, so maybe he's in that range, that 4.46 to 4.48, because I thought he had good speed to carry vertically. But I thought the thing that made him even better, where he didn't necessarily always have to open up and run, is that he had a good understanding of angles and how to cut guys off and pin guys into the sideline when he was carrying vertically. And you saw that repeatedly time and time again. The one thing I thought for the most part, his zone awareness was good, but I saw a few times where he didn't necessarily pass off those rub routes. And you saw that come up in a couple games. And as you can always tell when the other DB, throws the hands up, we call it being an open palms guy. You got the palms open trying to figure out what happened. But he was my CB1. Just based off of just pure talent, cover skills, and coverage ability. I thought, I thought he got stuck transitioning, getting in and
Mm.
out of breaks, but I thought that was not always due to a lack of flexibility, but just lower strength. And again, hearing you say that he's 19 years old, it makes all the sense in the world. He's still developing his strength, but I liked everything about him. I think he's a pure cover player. And I think when he, hopefully he returns to full health, like we've talked about on this show time and time again, it takes you 12 months to feel like yourself. And so right at the top of the pre-draft process is January. He'll be 12 months. So we can probably expect to see him do everything in that process.
Yeah, and my notes I put he had legit ball skills. He's a legit red zone ability to lock down wide receivers on the fades and the quick game as well. And again, he is also 19 years old, so you would expect he gets better. Also, let me ask you this: for someone who was in the league in the front office for almost 20 years, how far has the medical advancements come in terms of recovering from ACL? Because that feels like that's been a sea change. Forget about going back to Joe Namath when they had no way to fix the ACLs, but even the last 10 to 20 years, I feel like a lot has happened.
Oh yeah, it's changed drastically. There was a time where the ACL was the kiss of death, where
Mm.
most guys just never really fully recovered. It affected their ability to play moving forward. And I think, in the new era, I want to go back to maybe when Adrian Peterson tore his ACL and he was back in a very, very short amount of time. And he, went on to have a great season. You want to go back even further. You look at Willis McGahee, who tore everything in his knee in that game against Ohio State. And then a
Mm.
month and a half later, after the combine, he jogged a 40 at Miami's Pro Day, which was crazy. Now, his recovery ended up taking a little bit longer, but to tear everything that he did and have the surgery and jog a 40 was very impressive. So medical advancement has come a long way with these injuries, and particularly in the knee. Now the next one to catch up is going to have to be the Achilles because that's becoming the new popular injury for some of these guys.
Yeah, and like I tell you every time we talk, I'm worried about that as an old person. So I like needing to make those advancements as well. You know what's interesting about AP is that we talked to Eric Sugarman, who was the head of medicine for the Vikings when AP had torn that ACL. Obviously, he worked with Rick Spielman, so we had him on the podcast, and he talked about number one, it was miraculous because it was like 6 months or something because it happened
Six
like in
months.
December, January, and then he came back and he ran for an insane number of yards. The other thing is AP was special in that there's one AP, and physically he was doing things that not even other NFL players were able to do. That Wilson McGahee story is nuts, though. As someone who has torn their ACL, the idea you trying to jog 6 weeks after you had your ACL reconstructed is bonkers, bonkers to me for sure. But I'm not worried about it. At 19 years old, Jermod McCoy, excuse me, I think he's going to be fine, and I think he's going to get a lot better. And talk a little bit about the leaps that these players can make when you are fresh out of high school, essentially, as still a teenager, in terms of understanding your role in the offense. Because even when you talk to players who are first, second, third year in the league, and they're playing defensive back, for example, there's still so much they don't know and not comfortable with, and they play slow. And you and I have talked about that. So I'd imagine there's a vast room for improvement just with the above the next stuff that McCoy can do as he gets more comfortable.
Yeah, and it's again, it's the analogy I like to use, Ryan. If we both left and drove to your house, you give me the directions. You're going to get to your house quicker than I am if we're leaving from the same destination because you're not thinking about making the right turn or is this the right turn? You're just instinctively driving there. Versus me, I have the directions. I know what to do. I know where to go, but I'm not moving as fast because I want to make sure I'm making those right turns. And for a player like Jamad, again, we have to remember this was last year, and he made first team All SEC last year in his first year at Tennessee in a new system, learning a new system. So this year was supposed to be his year to be comfortable, knowing what he can do, knowing the chances that he can take in certain coverage looks. And so that's what you were looking forward to. So it's going to be a process for all these young guys. They're coming in from these high school teams that just play cat coverage. Hey, you just cover that cat across from you. And as long as you do that, we're good. Versus going into, you see my sweatshirt, Ravenwood High School. We had a kid, Donovan Starr, who's a big time prospect that left Ravenwood High School and is early enrollee at Auburn. And he took his lumps in the spring because he was still learning how to play, at that college level. And at Ravenwood, they run a complex system on defense. You know what I mean? And so there's going to be growth because now you're not the best player on the field. You're going against other guys that are just as talented, if not more talented than you.
Yeah, and I think we get caught up on sort of forgetting those things, at least on the media side. And maybe, it happens in the league and maybe happens at these college programs as well because you're expecting so much from a 19-year-old who looks like he could be 27 physically, and there's just still so much room for growth. And, sometimes it's hard to be patient. But Jermod McCoy checks all the physical boxes. You just want to see it, put it all together. Unfortunately, he had the knee injury, but I'm not worried about that. And it doesn't sound like you're too worried about it either. Before we take another quick break here and get to your son, where are you on my Will Johnson comp?
I think he's faster than Will. I think he's twitchier than Will, and I just think he's overall tougher than
Ooh,
Will. So,
ooh.
and it's just what the tape has shown me. So I like him, and I was a big Will Johnson fan, and coming into it, Will Johnson was my cornerback one. So I think there's probably a couple guys that you could probably compare him to from a full picture, full scale of ability standpoint than Will.
Last summer, Will Johnson's comp, even when you talked to some scouts, was is he going to be Patrick Surtain the second? The answer right
Sca-
now, in terms of the right, he didn't run a 4.3. But look, the training camp reports have been good. But all right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. If you have him on a scale, Will Johnson here, and then Patrick Surtain here, where are you putting Jermod? Let's put a bunch of expectations on a 19-year-old.
I put him in the middle. I put him. I
Oh, that's
put him.
sorry.
I put him in the because I put him ahead of Will Johnson. I put him
Yeah.
ahead of Will Johnson, but I was a huge, huge, huge Patrick Surtain fan just because of him being a technician. I was a huge, huge fan of his coming out, so I had him in a different stratosphere than either of these guys. That's why I
Okay.
say the
Being a
middle.
huge.
I'm not straddling the fence.
Uh huh. being a huge Patrick Surtain II fan. It's like being a huge Peyton Manning fan come out. You really went on a limb on that one.
Listen, I'm gonna send you my report when we get off.
Okay. I look forward to that. In fact, as I was looking back over this, J.C. Horn actually went one pick ahead of Patrick Surtain. J.C.'s been good, but he struggled to stay healthy. Patrick Surtain is one of the best players in the NFL. But again, like I always say, Rand, we don't know. We all find out together.